Now, financial markets are reacting dramatically to Trump's announcement. Major US indices ended Monday's session more than 1% higher. At one point, oil prices fell as much as 13% as the news that the US will hold strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure. Kristen Salome reports from the New York Stock Exchange.
Oil prices fell and markets rallied on Monday after President Donald Trump announced that he would postpone any further attacks on Iranian oil facilities. It was 2 weeks ago that Brent crude, the international benchmark for oil, was trading at nearly $120 a barrel. By Friday, it was down to $112 a barrel. On Monday, it closed just under $100 a barrel, and investors were very happy about that. They were buying stocks across all 11 sectors. All 11 sectors were trading higher on Monday, everything from technologies to financials to consumer spending. And airline stocks, for example, an industry that relies very heavily on fuel, saw some of their losses erased on Monday with this news. But this isn't the first time we've seen a rally during this conflict. Many of them have been short-lived as events in the Middle East have changed. And whether this one holds will depend, of course, on whether or not the pause in the conflict holds as well. Kristen Salome, Al Jazeera, New York.
Now, joining me in the studio is Ross Harrison. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and author of Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. Welcome to the show. It's almost a fool's errand to try and predict what's going to happen next, but I want to lean on your experience because there's a massive trust deficit here between Iran and the US. The Iranians simply don't believe that the Americans are going to do what they've said because of experience. How do we get over that?
Well, I think there's multiple layers of distrust here. One is the pattern that Donald Trump has set going back to 2018, Imran, when after Obama negotiated a deal that Iran was complying with, the Trump administration withdrew from that deal and imposed maximum pressure sanctions. So that was betrayal number one. The second was last June, 2025, in the middle of negotiations or towards the end of negotiations, there was an attack by Israel and the United States. And again, just a few weeks ago, seems like a year ago, but a few weeks ago, we had the same kind of pattern. So that's one piece of it. But the other piece of it, Imran, I think is important to consider is that there's been an eliminationist strategy on the part of the United States and Israel. Whether the United States was fully behind it, we don't know. But certainly the Israelis have taken the position that they don't want to negotiate. In fact, they want to shut down any possible negotiating path between the Trump administration and Iran, potential path, by eliminating the regime and bringing the regime down. So there is that trust issue there, but there's other issues that they have to get over other than just trust in order to take the current moment of optimism and turn it into something better.
But you've got this idea that, you know, there is no trust, but diplomacy has to take place. These guys have to talk to each other in some way if you're going to end all of this. But how do you get there? Are there confidence-building measures? How do you get there from this position?
Yeah, I don't think confidence-building measures are important at this point because, as you indicated, how do you create confidence-building measures with a lack of trust? I think the key is, does each of the parties trust their position in terms of leverage, in terms of getting out of this conflict? So the Iranians have to believe that they gain something more from the negotiating table or from cessation of hostilities than they can gain from maintaining and escalating hostilities. And same with the United States and same with Israel. And bringing those things into sync is very difficult. And the other thing, Imran, that's important is, you know, it only took a couple of people to launch this war, but to rein it in, aside from all the factors we've talked about, trust and all those other dynamics, it requires a Herculean effort and a choreography to bring all of the actors into a situation where they all have a stake in de-escalation. And the thing I would point to is I think Israel is the one that may, possibly it'll be Iran, but Israel may have less of an interest in ceasing hostilities than the other two.
The other thing here that I think is going to be interesting for our audience is the fact that when Donald Trump pulled out the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, in 2015, the excuse that was given back then is that, yes, Iran was sticking to the letter of the deal, but not the spirit. Like, he wanted a much wider deal. Now, we're reading that this perhaps will be a much wider framework for a deal than it was before. It won't be file by file, so they won't negotiate the nuclear file first and then the ballistic missiles and then proxies. Everything is on the table all at once. But that's dangerous because if one part of the puzzle falls down, then it's all gone, right?
Yeah, but the whole substructure in terms of Iran's negotiating position, the U.S. negotiating position has changed through this war. So it's not clear how they get to that kind of a position. I think what's important now is I think we're putting the cart before the horse in terms of thinking about a broad universal deal. The key thing is to get the parties to basically to end this war and then have enough. That's when the confidence building measures come in, if there is confidence, in order to get to have a framework agreement and lead it into some kind of a final agreement. But that's a big ask from where we are today.
I mean, diplomacy is always about, carrot and a stick. Now, there is a stick headed towards the Persian Gulf at the moment. The expeditionary force from the US, 2,200 troops. It's going to take them a few days to get there. The Iranians I've been speaking to have said there is no diplomacy here. They're just they're just playing for time. Mm-hmm. Any sympathy with that argument?
Well, I think that's a possibility. I mean, this morning when I was asked with very little information, what did I make of the Trump's social media tweet or message? I said, well, it's either the beginning of an opening or it's a diversionary tactic. So it certainly could be. And if I were the Iranians, I'm sure, are planning for the latter. And I think what's the reason for that is I think that the Iranians believe that they hold they cannot fight the United States kinetically or militarily. They know that. So they have to build leverage. And they have believed that by the horizontal contagion of the war, spreading the war into the Gulf Arab states where we're sitting right today, and also putting a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, that's their leverage. So they have to be preparing for that. But the problem, I think, with I think the Iranians also have plans for if the Americans come with that task group. And I think what the problem I think the Trump administration is in, which is maybe why the negotiating or the opening is real,
right,
is that they realize that militarily they really can't solve the problem.
Right.
Because the oil is not going to, if the goal is oil to flow, it's not going to flow until cessation of hostilities.
Ross, thank you very much for your thoughts. Fascinating as ever. Now,